All right, hi everyone. Welcome to our 24th video session. Today we're going to be talking about creating a zero waste city. But before we get started, I'll just go through a brief introduction of who we are at Impaction and what we're trying to do in our video sessions, and then we can learn a little bit more about who's on this call. Ultimately, at Impaction, we're just a community that empowers people to make a positive social change in the world around them. And what we do at video sessions is just to come together 1 hour every other week to discuss a new idea or talk to people in the field, just so we can get more of an understanding about who's making a positive impact and what our roles are to play into that. So like I said, today we're going to be talking about creating a zero waste city. But before we get started, I'm just going to ask everyone to introduce themselves in 2 sentences or less. I'll start with myself. I'm Shivani. I'm one of the co-founders of Impaction, and I am based in Chicago, Illinois. Tanvi, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Tanvi. I am the product manager with Impaction and I'm based in Boston.
Awesome, thank you. Sukanya, do you want to go next?
Yes. Hi, I'm Sukanya. I'm one of the co-founders of Impaction and I'm based in Texas. Neha, you want to go next?
And I'm a aspiring social entrepreneur, and I'm also based in Chicago. And I met Shivani through Shaper, and let's see what she's all about and what Impaction is all about. So that's what I'm here for.
Lots of pressure. Oh, Nikisa just left. Okay, so why don't we get started with the call and the content for today, and then as people filter in and out, we'll go through introductions again. So ultimately today we're going to be discussing stories about cities and enterprises who are aiming to create a zero waste environment and the future of waste overall. We are also going to brainstorm about how their lifestyles can be applied to ours no matter where we're located in the world. So in preparation for this call, we reviewed articles around waste reduction, lifestyles, employment opportunities, and creation. So ultimately the people who are creating something new to contribute to the space. And these are all a part of our current Impaction Innovation News products. Our articles from our Impaction News product, and ultimately what we're trying to do is use some of these ideas and use some of these articles, combine them, and try to create something new from it. So that's essentially what we're doing, and I'll share my screen and just briefly go through where these articles came from. So this is our Innovation News articles right here, and then some of the articles that we're going to be discussing today are going to be coming from some of these entrepreneurs that are making real change around the world. So before we get started, or we already started, but so ultimately let's just get started with the waste reduction lifestyle model that we saw in Kamikatsu, Japan. So can someone explain what this model was to the rest of the group, and then we can talk about it further.
I can go ahead and explain the model.
Sure.
So a little introduction about what the article was, if you guys didn't get a chance. So the town of Kamikatsu in Japan is located near the center of Tokushima Prefecture, and it's about an hour's drive away from the capital city of Tokushima. And it has a population of about 1,580 people who reside in some 800 households located all over the landscape. And in 2003, Kamikatsu set itself a goal of eliminating waste by 2020 without resorting to incinerators or landfills. And now it has become the first municipality in Japan to promulgate a zero waste policy. So they used a 3-pronged approach, and the first step was composting of raw household garbage. So given that Kamikatsu's communities were all really widespread across the area, it was getting very difficult and expensive for them to purchase a garbage truck to make pickups from all of these places and then go back to the incinerator. Additionally, they did a study of the composition of the garbage that every household generated, and they realized that it was mostly raw garbage and it had a high moisture content. And to incinerate such kind of garbage, the incinerators would have to be supplemented with fuel, which largely comes from fossil fuels or any other such source. So that would add to the environmental pollution. So instead, the village opted for a different approach, which is composting of its garbage. So in 1995, Kamikatsu began offering financial assistance to residents of every household to buy home garbage composters. So because of that, all the residents could buy the composters at a highly discounted rate. And because they removed this price barrier, the adoption rate for these composters became 97%. And that means most of the raw garbage got composted in the households where it was generated in the first place. The second step that they took along with that was getting recycling providers. So with the enactment of the Container and Packaging Recycling Act at a national level, the town began sorting all the collected recyclables that were covered. But Kamikatsu sought external providers who can manage the entire recycling process. And the officers of the town hall began getting more companies who recycle waste, who recycle plastic, getting more and more companies who recycle different types of recyclable materials from plastic to paper to aluminum. And because of that, they started with sorting and recycling 9 categories of trash, but now they have grown up to 45 different categories. And the last step was, encouraging a BYOR approach, that is, bring your own resources. So the residents were asked to drop off their waste into their waste station, which was their waste collection station, which was open from 7:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. And all the residents of the town get their trash, the recyclables, to this waste center, and they also get additional help from the staff to sort out this trash. But eventually, what became of this waste station is that it became a place for people to come and talk to the staff, to talk to each other. So it became like a community gathering place, especially for women and people of the households that took in charge of the garbage disposal. So they created a community activity through this. And now they are contemplating the need to turn their attention towards reusing of materials. And they have started this approach with a new project, which is called Cloth Diaper Starter Kits, where they are providing residents of the town who have infants with these starter kits up to the kid's first birthday. And because of this, what has happened is that, disposable diapers have to be incinerated, but cloth diapers can be washed and reused. So this is first of their many upcoming projects of encouraging a reuse attitude. And their efforts are still going on, but they are good on their way to approaching this goal by next year. So yeah, this is their model in short.
That's really cool. And I think one of the biggest things that I learned from this article was about how extensive waste collection can be, as in 45 different categories of recycled material is just mind-blowing to me. If I stick something in the recycling bin, I don't think twice about what category it's going in, how segregated it needs to be, and I don't even think about like the entire supply chain of what this can be. So that was like that's crazy to me. Does anyone have any thoughts or any thing that they learned about this article or about what Tanvi said?
I did. I learned how a small town could create such a unique impact approach to reduce waste and how to make their city a zero waste city, and how they're setting examples for people around the world. And the process of composting their own garbage is a very unique approach. And a lot of, by burning like a lot of plastics, in the article it was given like one of the cities in Japan started burning plastics, which is a huge issue. It causes a lot of air pollution. A lot of people get affected, they get a lot of health diseases and everything. So considering of a lot of external ways of eliminating waste, creating a proven simple approach that everyone could implement in the day-to-day life is an easygoing process to reduce waste.
I also think one of the biggest takeaways here was removing the barriers that their community faced. Right? So they kind of did the trade off and they found a middle ground of what we can provide to the people here so that they get on board with our policies. And I think I really like that. So there is another town which is bigger, much bigger than Kamikatsu in India. That's where I'm from. And that town became the first zero waste city in India. And they had a similar approach, was trying to change the habits. And what they did was basically remove barriers that stopped people from doing this. I think Kamikatsu did the same thing, and that is one of the biggest things that I feel is required, especially for something that requires additional effort.
I think you two brought up really good points, and I think that's like a very good transition to like the next question that I wanted to ask everyone is that what are some things that some lessons that we can take from Kamikatsu's model into our daily lives? I, for one, think that especially when we're talking about some of these, I mean, you can compost, you can recycle, you can't really, it takes a lot more effort to create even home composters, especially on such a large scale in the US. But what is the US quote unquote equivalent of home composters, or what is the Kenya quote unquote equivalent of creating home composters? How do we empower ourselves, our close family members, others to join some of this zero waste movement? And should we, is another question. I don't want it to only pinpoint to one mindset. Do we think that creating a zero waste city is worth it? I guess that's my question. I'm going to ask Mihai if he could volunteer.
Is somebody talking right now, or?
Oh, I was going to ask you if you could volunteer an answer to that question that I just asked.
Oh, you asked me. Sorry,
Yeah.
My internet keeps cutting.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think that it's very noble. It's a noble cause, and more people should do it. I still think that working is really complex, and it depends on the country and the local municipalities that are looking to put forth and put it in place. Otherwise, it's just going to be a fringe movement of people that care about the issue. And maybe a takeaway, I think, would be to really empower the grassroots movement to make it worthwhile for people to do this, and to kind of tap into people's psychology and make it cool to go pick up trash instead of playing Pokemon Go. So I think that a lot of innovation needs to come out of these people that truly care about this, and come up with innovative technologies and ideas and things like that to make it work, because I think it really is complex in how to do it right, and there's so many components to it. Even if if somebody was to go and try to like recycle, well, you have to think about the infrastructure that you need to put in place for that to work, like the trucks that go and carry it from one facility to another, and that facility needs to be powered. So it's really hard to accomplish zero waste, and I feel like it's going to be a slow movement, but yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned. I don't know if I've said anything that has value, but but yeah, that's my take on it.
No, you definitely did, and I think that you showed like a quite amount of things that we need to be considering, especially like the ecosystem that supports this mindset that we all know is that I think most of us agree with, that especially in today's time where creating a zero waste city or just working on environmental conservation is an utmost importance. Maybe not all people agree. Maybe some policymakers don't even believe that climate change is an issue, but I think for the majority of scientific folk that do, working with practitioners and executors to create a system like that is super important. And I think another thing that you said that was valuable was about quote unquote making recycling or composting cool. So that is a bit more about like the marketing side of things. How are you tapping into this generation and future generations to adhere to this concept of working to combat climate change? So that's another thing, like how we tell the story, how we are shifting our narratives is a huge way of showing that, all right, we're all behind this movement, and maybe science and data may not be like the coolest factor that brings people on board, and there are other ways of telling people or empowering people to join. So I don't know, does anyone have any thoughts or anything about that before we shift to the next article?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, like appealing to people's psyche, because even with this example, I realized that you have to meet where people are. They won't even come halfway for you in this case because it requires additional efforts. They have to change their routine, maybe. They have to be more aware, more conscious about this. So I think if you go and meet where they are, say, like I said that maybe while doing their morning run or something like that, go pick up trash along with it. Something related to a game or some kind of an activity that incentivizes them. So that's really important, I think.
Completely agree. Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone have any other thoughts, questions, or anything before we move on?
I just want to add one point. Like recently, I read an article where in Alaska, the ice is melting at a faster rate, which is because of climate change. And scientists have been warning that if we go at this rate, it's really not good for us, the world. So a lot of measures have been taken to fight climate change, and plastic I see is another way of contributing to climate change, because in most parts of the world, when they're not able to recycle plastic or dispose it in a correct manner, they end up burning it, which causes a lot of pollution to the air. Along with this, the industrial waste that most of the big manufacturing companies just dispose without following the rules set up by government. I see these two as a huge factors, along by creating a zero waste city, educating people, manufacturing companies about all these things plays a huge role in fighting climate change or creating a city like this in Japan.
Yeah, Sukanya, you brought up two very good points, and yeah, I think that very much adheres to like some of the data and some of the research that we've been finding, and a lot of that is really important for us to substantiate where our argument comes in the first place and why we should advocate for some of these policies that may not be, some of these policies that are trying to fight some of like these more conservative issues that we've seen today. But I think these are all really good points. Let's shift to the second phase or the second round of today's video session, where we talk about opportunities that we can create through zero waste. So the Mr. Green article that we read was about this enterprise that is trying to combat the waste management system. So we see that waste management is a huge issue in Africa and actually Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Nikesa, this might be of interest to you, but the city in Nairobi produces around 2,400 tons of waste every day, of which roughly 60% is collected and only 10% recycled. The rest is dumped illegally or burned. So an enterprise called Mr. Green Africa employs marginalized groups to collect waste and sell it to make recycled materials. These recycled materials can be processed into raw materials, and Mr. Green guarantees that pickers who are collecting waste, they will be paid a premium price for their services, so they can make a higher, stable income, and they can help themselves out of poverty while at the same time contribute positively to their environment. So it's really cool that ultimately they're employing these marginalized groups to close the gap between like collecting waste and making sure that it turns into raw materials for this enterprise. So ultimately, I just wanted to leave it open to all of you. What do you think that they did well? What is some of the feedback or questions that you have? And what are some of the things that we can learn from this article?
One thing that I really liked about the article is how they are empowering the people to understand even they are doing a good job and they're improving the lives of other people. And I like the T-chat conversation where they're creating a loyalty program tracking the impact of the individual and then discussing with them to improve their earnings. So the people, for them, their integrity is very important, and I see how much they end up selling the products that's being offered by the company to them, like gloves and everything, to make extra money. But having a conversation with them to build a more loyal approach is actually helping them create a better waste management system. And Nairobi, considering it's being called as the New York of Africa.
Absolutely. And yeah, Nikisa, we're talking about this Mr. Green Africa enterprise that's based in Kenya right now. And they're employing marginalized groups to pick up trash and then ultimately turning it into recycled material. So we thought that this would be of interest to you a little bit, granted that you're based in Kenya. Oh. Cute. Oh, is that okay? I don't think she can hear us. Okay. Anyways, so yes, thank you, Suganya. Tanvir, Mihai, do you have anything else to add to this particular article? Like what they did well? What can we learn from them? Anything like that?
Yeah, I think it's a good example of meeting people where they are and tapping into the market and what people are currently doing and making that come out as a net positive instead of a net negative. So I really like that they kind of solved two problems in one by employing the people that I'm not sure if they were homeless or what their business was collecting trash, but kind of like empowering those people, but also putting value to their work and allowing them to do impactful things and being rewarded for it. So I think that was very innovative. perhaps social enterprises should always try to do that and try to use different types of problems and combine them into one synthesis.
Yeah, all of that feedback was very valuable. Thank you. Tanvi, it looks like you have something to say.
I was essentially going to say the same thing that Mihai did. That in terms of their impact, also, they're doing some great work, especially employing people who basically what they do otherwise is go to these illegal dumping sites and get and sort all the trash and then sell it for themselves. But that's it does not guarantee a good wage. The working conditions are also pretty bad, especially if they're on their own. So with this, at least they can get fair price, regular income. So that would really help lift these people, these rag pickers, out of poverty.
One more unique thing that I observed in the article is how this idea was adapted from Switzerland and how they could expand this to other countries where waste management is an issue, especially in other African and South Asian countries. I see there is a huge potential in expanding this approach where you can create more job opportunities for the marginalized people and make them also realize when they can make a decent living and gain a lot of respect in the society, irrespective of what job they are doing. So I see a huge potential in this article if they are trying to expand to developing countries.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're tapping into the space around like creating job opportunities for marginalized groups that aren't traditionally like they may not have a resume, they may not have extensive work experience, but they can contribute very well to the system that we're trying to create and optimize. So I know, like, especially at Impaction, we read about like special needs people who are now working in cafeterias because and they're being employed in cafeterias, and ultimately they're creating jobs. I think it's out in like Asia, in Japan or something, but ultimately they're trying to create opportunities for people who may not have jobs in the traditional sector but are making huge amounts of impacts, and that can learn to empower them and make them like more independent individuals in ways that we didn't think that was at least like the traditional sector didn't think that that was possible. So there's more areas of opportunity that we're trying to create than we previously thought. Like, for instance, there's a startup out actually in Chicago, Mihai. I met someone at an event out in Chicago this week, and there was this guy. He was like a huge business entrepreneur and multimillionaire or something, but then he quit his job because his son was autistic, and he saw that in the community, especially the autism community, a lot of the times that their entire lives are dependent on their parents, and they're usually stuck at home, even though they have a lot of skills, like attention-oriented skills that are often overlooked. And this business entrepreneur created a nonprofit for his son who has autism, and ultimately is showing that giving them like employment opportunities, and saying that, you know what, it was because of like, I think it was a data analytics gig or something, but the amount of reports that they had created and they had comprehensively reviewed and assessed, their error rate was less than 10% over I think at least 5 years or so. And they're working on employing kids with autism because they have a special attention to detail. And this empowers autistic kids to ultimately become more independent and really show that, like, their quote unquote disabilities is actually an area of power for them. So that was really cool to see that there are like overlooked areas in the world, but we're finally tapping into them. I've been talking a lot, but I'll keep going. So we're gonna move on to our next article. If anyone has anything left to say, just let us know, and we can tap in right away. But so we're gonna move on to creation, and in creation we saw two different startups. There is one that's turning plastic waste into bricks for affordable housing, and the other is a cafe that makes things out of broken things instead of replacing them altogether. So I think that this was these two articles. Let me just share my screen really quick. These two articles were the things that we could apply the most to our lives right now. They're not on like a systematic scale. These are just mindsets ultimately, that are trying to show that, what we thought was fixed or what we thought was broken is something that we can make something new out of, and some of the things that we think are waste can actually be housing or can promote affordable housing for other people. So I just wanted to ask you guys, what are your thoughts about this article, and maybe even a recommendation of what we can do better in our lives to promote something like this.
With those repairing cafes, I saw that their model is open source, so it can be replicated by any community, any town, any school or university. So I think that's one of the thing any social enterprise or a non-profit should go for, if that aligns with their outcomes and goals, of course. But replication and open source, these are the two things I think we all should keep in mind. Even if we start like a small initiative, if it has a potential to have great impact, and if you have chalked out most of the details, it's great to have it open source, or great to have like a handbook made out of all your activities and what you did, and kind of distribute it in some way, because that is the fastest way, I think, for scaling impact without having to put in too much of your own resources. So I think that's what I found most interesting about that.
The most inspiring thing for me was how we can build a house for $273 US dollars for underrepresented communities. Even they have a home for themselves where they can live with their families. There's something inspiring, and especially homes made out of plastic. I think most of the people around the world do not have proper homes. Using those extra plastics to build homes for them is the right way to curb waste management issues, and at the same time providing people with home facilities. I see two benefits out of this model actually.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and a lot of what both of you have said. And I think that it's really amazing how they can make at least the image of that house seem like a very robust house, and it would only cost about $300 to make, or I guess to buy or something like that. But I don't know, like if that's completely scalable, because to me, it also comes back to culture, as we've talked about before, and maybe in a third world country, a very cheap house like that is fine and it appeals to a lot of people. But I think in other countries that are more developed, I'm not sure if there's a demand for homes like that. And then in that case, like you would need to create some other business model that would work and to allow people to tap into that. And I don't know. Maybe it will work, and I'm curious if there are any social enterprises in the U.S. that do this type of work, or other countries in Europe, or things like that, or like first world countries, so to speak.
Maybe I can share an experience of Kenya on the plastics and
Absolutely.
how some of the plastics are being recycled to make poles. So the poles are basically what are being used to provide the fencing material. So probably that's something that you can consider in the developing countries, using this plastic to make poles.
Nikisa, I think you're cutting out if you can hear us.
Portable, and that's, I think you heard of Balton, and they trade in Kenya as Amiran. So they have a portable digester that actually is used in homesteads to recycle whatever waste you have, just to produce gas, and the gas can be used within the homestead. Um, Things are changing. It's not like the way it was before. So we are hoping that things can become even better, especially with the use of plastics. And right now there's a ban on the plastic bag. We are moving on to the ban of plastic bottles. So things are changing, and we are going to see more and more innovative ways of how we can recycle these items.
That's good to hear. Like, that's really good to know, because ultimately, like, we're seeing so much like waste that we, like, in articles, just we just see like so many pictures of like what the difference is, especially with like how even individual cities in the US handle waste. But some of the fact that these initiatives are happening in Kenya as well is good to hear. I think, like, just from your perspective, I wanted to hear more about what you think that like local citizens can do to help with like waste management in general, and what your thoughts are about like how we can empower more people to help with environment.
Um, can you guys hear
Maybe
me?
to contribute on that, I would say I think for local citizens, it would be very important to have a strategy in the garbage collection, because currently that's what we don't have. So if we could have a strategic way of collecting our garbage, so that plastics can go to plastics, and food waste, that's the organic matter, into organic matter in terms of separation, then it would help in terms of recycling. But currently, that's what we don't have. So if that can start at the local level, then it would be very good for us as Kenya, because I don't think we have that going on right now.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you, Nikisa. And I think Suganya, you also had something to contribute.
Yes, one example, one way I feel you can do is picking out all these simple ideas that can be implemented in day-to-day life and sharing it with people of how effectively they can use plastics in the plastics in their day-to-day life is another way of going further, like educating school kids, parents, or working employees at office about plastic disposal and different innovative ideas around plastics is another way to reduce waste is my idea.
Yeah, it starts with education, right? That's how it always starts with that. So education can lead to empowerment, and then that can create sustained change. But you have to make sure to scale it and like review it as much as possible, especially if you're the one that creating this initiative in the first place.
And also one more thing I think is people can also feel empowered because say if people are using shoes manufactured by Adidas makes their shoes out of plastic waste. In 2017, they've sold nearly a million pair of shoes from plastic waste. So if people are using Adidas shoes, they can feel empowered that they're doing some social impact, and that can still further motivate them to do more changes.
Supporting companies that are leading environment, like some of these conservative efforts.
I also think encouraging like this reuse habit.
Exactly, yeah.
So, maybe through workshops in the community or even in the schools, or just if there are more resources out there, that if I have like aluminum can and it's no longer used, what can I do with it? And because I'm also searching for upcycling things. Of course, there is a big barrier to it, which is time. So how do you incorporate this in your routine, maybe a monthly routine or a yearly routine? So I guess some sort of workshops and volunteering workshops, especially if it's nearby in your community, in the community, uh, what's called the townhouse, something like that. Maybe that will help. And some sort of incentivizing if it's through the community, like, okay, let's all take part in this, make something great out of waste, and maybe as a community we can sell this and then put the money back into, say, a new playground or new machines in the gym, something like that.
So you're incentivizing communities with things that they know that is a part of their daily lives. So that's smart. That's really smart. Okay. I have one last question to ask everyone, and if Nikesa is able to, would love to hear from you and Mihai in specific, but this is more of like a conceptual question. If you had to create a city with a zero waste lifestyle, what are 5 things that you would prioritize enforcing? Let's say you're the president, or you're like the person where if you say something, anything will get
The
done.
mayor.
Or a mayor, yeah. So what would be the 5 things that you would prioritize to create a zero waste city?
Can I go? Because I think phone is going to die. My battery is going to die anytime soon. So for me, the first thing would be reducing food waste, because that's the most, that's what is happening currently in Kenya. We have a lot of food waste, especially during the peak period. And if we are able to reduce the food waste, either through preservation, and preservation could be either through drying or processing, just to ensure that we have enough during the dry periods. And it happens that we also have drought and people go hungry. So if we could be able to dry all this food that is being wasted instead of throwing away, it would be much better. And then, of course, the second thing is the plastics. That is something that is really key. If we can find a way in which we can affordably recycle, it would be good. I like the fact that we have the water department basically has improved in terms of the bottles, because you can actually recycle. They sell this like metered water for drinking. So you would just take your bottle and they would refill it for you. So that actually reduces the number of bottles that you have to purchase and directly into recycling. Anyway, so maybe again also to push government for policies, and policies that can be favorable to not only reduce the amount of products that we are throwing out like garbage, but also to make it more friendly, environmentally friendly in terms of what we are recycling. Like incineration, we know what happens, especially when it comes to greenhouse emissions and all these things. So it would be policies first, how implementable are they, and the follow-ups after that. For me, the key thing would basically be policies, just policies. Yeah.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Nikisa. I'm going to shift this question over to Mihai.
All right. Hey, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I had similar thoughts as well. It's a pretty difficult question. I don't know if I'm going to get it right. I feel like it's one of those questions.
There's no right answer.
Right. So I mean, I feel like yeah, I definitely agree that less using less food and less waste is really important. I would probably also. So I recently heard that. So there's like reduce, reuse, recycle, right? So, and the order I think is really important. And I think that the funny thing is that people are like, actually people in general probably don't really care, and they get to like the recycling point. They don't really care about the other two. They almost forget about the other two. And I think that's the key is reducing, right? So kind of enforcing a very minimalist lifestyle. And that kind of goes back to allowing people to tap into what do they really find valuable. And more likely than not, that would be community. And then two, uh, reusing, right? And so like I would definitely enforce people to reuse absolutely everything they can. And I know that's not feasible. And like I think in this day and age, it's very infeasible to reuse everything because one, you may be very weird if you do that, and people would think you're crazy. And two, it's just not practical sometimes. And then I think the third thing I would do is for every single hour people spend in their day jobs, they need to spend on creating innovation towards the zero waste because I think that's high priority and there needs to be some sort of policy that incentivizes it because I think at the moment in a lot of countries right now it takes a lot of extra effort to be able to innovate or even work towards something sustainable because that's just not the way the world operates, and it kind of puts a strain on people if they do that. So if you make that a valuable component of their lives, then I think moving on to zero waste would become a lot faster. And I think another thing we haven't talked about on this call that I think is super valuable is actually the use of technology. So there was this episode that I can share on IRL that I listened to, and it's called like the impact of like servers and websites and like technology. So like even this call we're taking right now is actually wasteful, and it was really astounding to me to find out that like a pretty popular website that maybe 10,000 visitors a month or something like that, it generates as much CO2 emissions as driving a car excessively, like every day for a month. So that like blew my mind. I never even thought about it that way, but it's true. I mean, all this server space needs to be powered up somehow. So it's kind of funny that it's almost ironic that we're like trying to think of solutions, but at the same time we're polluting even just by doing so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is why not Amazon right now, but Microsoft and Google have turned to what's it called, data centers that are powered by renewable energy, and then they use the heat generated by it to power something else. So they are trying to trap and capture and reduce all of that. But it's true, yeah.
Oh man, then we're in trouble at Impaction because all of our calls are based on Skype, and we spend hours every Sunday talking on Skype.
The easiest option would be to offset this. Like, raise money for reforestation efforts and stuff like that. So maybe you can offset your whatever you're creating.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's what the episode was saying as well. That like basically that when they created the episode, they're saying that they've wasted a lot of pollution. They put out pollution by making it. So all the listeners should donate money to offset that just for the episode. And I thought that was really funny.
I like that. I didn't know that. That's very cool. Maybe like in the near future, that's what Impaction will do. Everything is virtual, but we're gonna invest a good amount of money into some of these efforts that we're hurting in the first place. But that's cool. Okay. Oh, thank you. I'm gonna check out that podcast. All right, everyone, it looks like it's closing time. But thank you so much for joining today's call. Please check out our previous video by clicking this button and subscribe to our channel by clicking this button. But yeah, please subscribe to our channel and see you in 2 weeks for our next session. We're going to be interviewing a social entrepreneur in the field that will be announced who it will be announced very soon. But thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Everyone.